What's up, guys? It's DK. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. Why are you even here, though? Didn't you know Ginger Man bad?
One thing I want to ask about is when Carrigan was kicked out, you gave some of the reason why there. I mean, if people don't know, famously, it was one of those ones where they even officially said zonic was one that chose to bench him. But at the time, no one knew that zonic actually was like a real coach. He wasn't just like a manager. So everyone thought, oh, that's just like, that's the cover for the players. It's not true, whatever. But I've heard the stories. It sounds like it's totally legit. When this move happened, though, what people won't know is that it was a big gamble to get Glaive. He'd just been off doing nothing. And in fact, if people forget, he wasn't even the in-game leader in Heroic. It was Snappy who was the in-game leader in that team. He was just a fragger. He kind of was just playing at this point in time. When this move happened, did it feel like a gamble for you guys? Did you know this was the guy to get?
I think we got to the conclusion that we couldn't work with Carrigan anymore. So we had to find a solution, right? And honestly, back then we could have done so many things different with Carrigan that maybe would have made it work, but back then we didn't know, and we got to the point where we just had to let him go, right? And then we were scouting, and I guess this was the possibility because Glaive was also in-game leading at previous times in other teams, and he was also really a good fragger back then, and also was in Astralis, and I do believe that it wasn't that much of a gamble. I think we did our homework well. I don't remember it necessarily and the specifics and stuff like this, but I didn't see it as that huge of a gamble, and we needed a replacement, basically.
Let me ask some questions about Glaive then, because I feel like one of the cool things as Astralis was taken apart piece by piece by piece is everyone got to see that like everyone was really good in the team, but it's not like one person was just the god player who did everything. It wasn't like Zonic was just the only mastermind and told everyone what to do. It's not like Glaive only called every strat and read the game. I mean, I always think the problem is collectively, because the team's the greatest ever, everyone sometimes overrates them, but then sometimes they underrate the individual parts. So here's what I'd like to ask about Glaive. I actually feel like because he was playing in a Danish team and the most famous team ever for structure and utility usage and anti-stratting and reading, I think people actually make it too polar opposite between him and Carrigan. They make it like, right, the joke is even Carrigan doesn't do this, but they make it like as though Carrigan never himself watched a demo, came in and he was just like an anime character, like, do this, and then it just works, right? And then they try to make it like Glaive had his notebook and he's like a blade team. He's like, right, Pirate Page 4, Strat 7, do that. Whereas what people don't know is like every great in-game leader has certain elements of all these qualities. So one thing I want to ask is, people might not understand, Glaive's a fucking amazing mid-round caller too, right? And he could come up with stuff on the fly as well, or a reaction, a read of the opponent, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, now we've also talked about it so much that we were anti-stratting and people weren't anti-stratting back then. But I do also believe that much of the mid-round was basically Glaive, right? And that's not something that you prepare for in an anti-strat or anything like this. I mean, maybe you can like look at rotations or something, and maybe he did, but it wasn't something that we as a team focused on, at least. So, I mean, basically, we run a lot of rounds based on anti-stratting because, I mean, people were really stupid back then. Like,
true.
I mean, they would definitely they would throw this smoke and you would just know the whole round, like, and it was so stupid at that point. And I mean, based off this, we also got a lot of confidence, and we would just be able to read people. And I guess it was also easy for Glaive watching the games and seeing like, okay, late round they like to stack B on Inferno. They would go free there, and let's just end A, right? I wouldn't know for sure because I wasn't focusing too much on that. That's maybe something you need to ask Glaive about.
Sure. One thing I did want to ask about is because now obviously a lot of the interview is going to be like, and then you won this event, and then you won this event, and then you beat all these teams, right? There's one big last like fail moment I have to ask you about really. And it is when you guys got Glaive, the results immediately were awesome. You're in like semis, finals again, and obviously you won the major within a few months. But the big one, I remember I was there, I also made the mistake of doing a cheeky tweet where once you guys made the final, because you came from the hard side of the bracket, and then Optic Gaming made the final, which at the time, by the way, guys, had never done anything. Like, they were just like some, good NA side. I actually did an infamous tweet where, to be cocky, I did like, congratulations, Astralis, ELEAGUE Season 2 champions. And then obviously you guys lost the final, right?
Yeah.
Was it a shock to you lost this final? I mean, could you really have expected this team could beat you?
No. I mean, as you said, like, I believe we beat some really good teams before, and then we got I mean, it is, again, this thing where you have to win, but then I think Neff was playing on this team, and he popped up in this game, and it was just like, what the fuck happened, right? And you start questioning yourself, and I mean, everything is just going downhill from, and I don't even think it was close, right? I actually think I
think the third map they blew you out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really a disappointment for us, but it also kind of strengthened us, and I think we learned a lot from that, and I guess the history will.
Sure, it worked out pretty well after that. Yeah, exactly. Right, obviously, look, let's talk about the major then. When ELEAGUE Atlanta came, right, the obvious thing is this, right? If people don't remember, it actually wasn't as easy as people remember. You guys went like 3-2 in the Swiss system even. You had like all these close games you were losing. So at the time, I actually think a lot of people probably were just like, they're going to choke again. And then famously, this is the part everyone forgets, is in the finals, that actually was like, mate, if ever there was a moment where like that narrative was going to just come like a tile of bricks, that third map is it, because I pretty swear to this day, I mean, I've even heard when Glaive joined Dents that like Cuban even like fucking talked to them about it, because like those VP guys to this day, I can tell you something, they get mad if you tell them that Astralis should have won this major. They're always like, look, they did win, but they were lucky. And then when we were up like, I don't know what it was, like 13-5 or something, man, they were like, they were like, basically in our mind, unfortunately, we did have the game won. Like, yeah, Cuban even said he was like preparing what speech he was going to give in his mind when they won, because they were on CT side training, they were up a million things. You guys were on like low buy and stuff. Give me some thoughts, because I feel like if this feels like a movie, mate. It's like you go to the worst moment, like the choke, but then come out and win. This is incredible. Give me some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could even have lost an overpass. And it was a close game as well. So I think we were pressured to the max in this series, and I don't necessarily agree with the DVP
of course,
guys.
Sure.
But we had some really close rounds, and I guess this is why they say it is, because I mean it's just down to a clutch or whatever it is, and then we are money broken or whatever it is, and I do also believe that being down, I don't remember, it was
pretty big,
7-1.
Yeah,
9-3, whatever it was. I think that's a huge accomplishment, looking from our side, or at least just looking from the outside, right? So maybe we can talk about VP being jokers.
He said it, not me, guys. I actually did want to ask about that, though. Yes, the part people forget is this, Xyp9x. There would have been no third comeback if it wasn't for Xyp9x, because on Overpass, they absolutely were, by the way, also heading to the win. That's the other reason, by the way, why they're salty. Because they're like, first of all, he bullshitted us on Overpass, then they robbed us on train. Because if people don't remember, you won, I think, one of the most iconic major clutches ever. By the way, I'm just saying this if you're Valve. I know they don't do the graffitis anymore, like... Why doesn't he get a graffiti? Like, you won a 1v3. If people remember, around like the birthday party area on Overpass, you had like 1 health or something mental, and you essentially, this is like one of your best clutches ever, because you have to find an off angle on every player, basically. Yeah. But you managed to sort of outbrain them. Can you give me some thoughts about this? It feels like this kind of a round, like a lot of people, I mean, you take 1 bullet and you're dead, right? This is an almost impossible clutch to win. Yeah,
I even think Bialy, I mean, I went to underground, and I would wait for Bialy because I knew he was B, but he was waiting for me, and I was thinking, well, he's not going to come. And then I went up, and he damaged me 99, and I had 1 HP left. And then, I mean, Pasha did a pretty stupid move by going through the toilets, and I would just kill him. But at that point, it's still a hard clutch because I had 1 HP, but I just took the HAs like headshot angle in party, and really wasn't really aware. And I do believe that they could have played it better, but I actually think that BLE read me, and
and he almost killed you.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a really important clutch, and I do believe that if I didn't win this, we would have been money fucked, and I do believe we would have lost that Overpass game as well.
Right, this might sound like an obvious question to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. Right, if a team has been chokers a lot of times and hasn't ever won the major, and they win in this fashion, does it change something about how they see themselves, what they think about choke, how they see like the chance to win future? Does it turn the story around just winning a big game like that?
I think you have to do it consistently, and I do think that this was also, when you have a major final like this, I think you also are pressured, and you also you will learn from this game. Everything is a learning in life, and to me, it's this who made us to what we became. And of course, all the other losses is also a learning, but getting that pressured, but also getting on the other side and winning, it felt so good, right? It was also it was always getting pressured, and then losing, And now we finally popped the balloon, right? And then it just went really good from there.
To ask you about the concept of clutching, which you're obviously so famous for, I've got an analogy for you. It's actually another Danish player, but it's from League of Legends. So in League of Legends, one of my favourite players was a Danish player called Froggen, who used to play for Alliance and Evil Genius.
I know him.
And one of the things about him was he was really famous for landing skill shots on people, right? Where you have to aim it and, time it. But what's funny is he would never say that like it was something awesome. He would always go, for me, I don't get it, because it's they just move so obvious. And I always wonder, why don't they just dodge? And also, he also told me that once it became a reputation that he was famous for landing them, then people would second guess themselves when they dodged and make it even easier. And now we can just land it every time. Well, the reason why I bring this up, you can see where I'm going here, is one, I always thought, like I said before, if anyone watches how you play the clutches, it's actually just how you should play all the angles and the clutches. But what people might not know is, because it's a pressure moment, other people don't react normally. They wig out a little bit and get creative. People might know some of the best players ever don't win clutches. And then likewise, once it became known you win clutches, I felt like suddenly then you win twice as many, because now the players scared. Give me some thoughts. You get the analogy right?
Yeah. You're definitely right. And I'll go back to playing, for example, a guy like Scream. I think he was really good with aim, but it was just so easily readable. And sometimes he would just go for the fights because he didn't know how to play a clutch, right? I do also believe that once I got all the clutches, like you said, I think even Simple said this in a Blast interview or something, that he would see my icon on the top of the screen, and I would just be smiling there, and he would just think fuck, because I was alone alive. And I guess it became like this, and people will second guess themselves, as you said, I don't know how many clutches I won just by waiting for a guy who would be uncomfortable and just strafe out on me. And where if the roles were swapped, I'll probably be waiting as the T or in the afterplant or whatever it is. But these guys are just their heartbeat is all over the place, right? And where is he coming? What is he thinking of now? Stuff like this. So definitely it made it way easier that I had this reputation for a long time.
The other reason I thought I'd ask about it right now, when we just talked about the VP majors, even though, look, that was at the birthday party area and that weird connector area, but I actually think Overpass on that fucking A site You might be the best clutcher ever there. Even though, by the way, that's a really hard site to clutch on because that's the one where there's a million angles they can be from. If you guess wrong and get the wrong communication from your teammates, you get shot in the back, or you have to time when you go out. They can obviously put a smoke on the bomb, etc. You were like legendary for winning. I mean, you've won like 1v4s on this against the best teams, etc. Was there something about, like, was that one of your favourite sites to play on and to win clutch on? Did you also see it as like a strength?
Definitely. I think there is also a long rotation on Overpass from B side to A side, and it just made me like have time to isolate the duels, and you would know like, okay, a guy from B side would come up to A and you could hear him, or if he doesn't like run, then he has to walk and it will take a long time, and by then he should probably come behind, and if he's not behind then he's probably walking, there is so many layers to it, and I think my best clutch actually was against FNATIC on this with a Galil. I don't know if you watched it, but it's 1v4, and I would just isolate all the duels. And I think it's just a clutch map in general. Now that Dust2 is back, I also believe that's a clutch map. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Right. One of the things when this team won this major and then won tournaments and became number one, and then you were battling with FaZe and SK, is there is one major that you guys could have won that got away, which is obviously Krakow. Because in this one, you guys beat SK. It was an awesome fucking game. In the semis, you had Gambit, who at the time, like, they were like an alright team, but I would guess even in the rankings, they were probably like 8th in the world or something. They weren't like some elite team. And then obviously in the final, it turns out you would have played them all. So, like, look, no disrespect to these teams, but this feels like it could have been another major. Like, what happened in this one?
It should have been. I mean, we went into the SK game and we thought this as the final. And I mean, I don't know, but we got it pretty easy, I think, even. And then we were like, okay, I mean, this bracket now. And I think it was just like, yeah, as you said, like Gambit, but they ended up winning it. But I mean, it wasn't good teams back, like
sure.
Back in the tournament, and I don't know really what happened, but we just got demolished by Gambit, or like we couldn't find our groove, and I guess it kind of goes back to this again where we were supposed to win it. Now it's not going good, and we don't know like what to do, and we just like going. Fumbling around in blind, and
sure.
They just like having all the confidence, right? So
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just feel like it's again maybe a mental thing, and that we should be winning, but we are not.
I have a good question to follow up on that, which is something I want to ask about. Basically, what you're describing, and you've described in a few scenarios where like a bracket looks easy, or you've beaten the good team already, like the real final, which if people don't know, it's notorious the greatest teams of all time have lost that. Like, just look at the first major ever. When Nip beat Very Games, they all say we thought we won the major already. Like, we couldn't believe it was possible to lose to FNATIC. So what people might not understand is this is actually what people like Heroic meant in those last years of CSGO, where it sounds stupid, where they'd be like, it's better to be the underdog. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, 'cause you haven't got any expectations. But what they actually mean is what you're saying, Xyp9x. What they mean is when you're playing against a team that you think is equal or better than you kind of know going in, right? I've got to play my best game. Like, there's no excuse. Like, I have to, from minute one, be in. I have to battle. And so it kind of forces you to play your best. But the hard thing, and the reason I ask this now is I feel like the Astralis in 2018, 2019 is the best team ever for this, is when you know you're the favourite and you know you should win and you know everything's... it's like a special mindset to still play at the top level, right? To still get a 10 out of 10 performance. Because obviously I'd say this team the next year was probably the best ever at this. You would win all the matches like that. And even when they would be doing the comeback, you'd thwart it. So do you think the mentality changed?
Yeah, I think there is a term for it, which is invincible. You get this invincible feeling that, I mean, I'm just going to go in and wreck these people. And we didn't have that with Gambit, for example. I mean, sure, we had to win it, or in paper, and we were confident, but it was not like, yeah, this is going to be a walk in the park kind of. And it was a good thing of having this walk in the park because we had so much confidence. Like, being this invincible team is just like, I mean, it's the best feeling ever, because you go in, you do all your preparation, you do everything, and everyone is like in good mood, and you just go in and like 16-3 people, and you're just like laughing it off, right? And I mean, it's special to have this, and I think we managed to do that because of also the people we were on the team and the persons, and we really liked each other as teammates and stuff like it. Like it really, that there needs to be so many things going right to have this feeling. To be honest, it's a difference of being in like the underdog role, in even like getting through and maybe even being favorites, and then just being invincible, right? And I categorize it like this.
One thing that I think people always forget about for the lineup when Magisk joined, that became the best ever and just won a million tournaments, and like the joke I always used to make is like a bad tournament was like, oh, we only made the semi-finals of this one. Like it was ridiculous, the rate, right? What people always forget is it actually only occurred because of an insane drama, which was when everyone was going to sign their contract again to play in Astralis, Kjaerbye, like some wrestling WWE move, just came out sort of like like in a North Jersey, what the fuck? And then he just didn't sign the contract. And I've heard behind the scenes there was no warning of this. Like really, everyone thought he was going to come on that day, like everyone else, sign the contract, and that team would keep playing for like 2 more years or something, right? Give me your thoughts on this. This sounds fucking crazy, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy story because we all had to sign our contracts, and to be honest, we really didn't know that Kjaerbye didn't like the whole situation about it, and at some point, I won't call the story because I wasn't really a part of it. But basically, he was saying that he was on ski vacation and he couldn't like write to us and stuff like this, and he would say he was sick as well or something like this, and basically. The next morning we find out that he's signing for North, and then he's announced. So it was a huge blow because we weren't thinking of changing back then, and then we had to find a replacement. And I think Zonic already told about the story with the config and Magisk and.
Would you actually have wanted config to join if he hadn't have like fucked up the interview? Is this someone you wanted to play with?
I think back then, I like config as a player, and I wouldn't see why I couldn't do that or wouldn't do that. But I really was happy that it was Emil, because I do believe he was also like he had this thing of being toxic, or at least the
perception,
narrative of being toxic, but it wasn't like. He wasn't toxic with us, like,
right?
But I also think that he saw this as a really big chance, right? And he saw this as like, now I have to really step up and do all the things right and be a good teammate, stuff like this. And I also think maybe, I mean, I think he came from Optic, back then. Yeah, I think he matured by just being. With other guys and other cultures and stuff like this. Really happy that we ended up getting Magisk, obviously.
Let me ask about him as a player then, because obviously later on he even was the MVP of a major. Like, what's funny is people, I mean, by the way, in the modern day, he now even describes himself as a support player. But back then, like, look, in this team, if you have Device and dupreeh, they're obviously going to have their roles and be the stars. But I always thought some of his qualities were kind of underrated. Like, famously, he was the guy where on CT side, like, you can't rush his side. Like, he wants to kill like 4 people every time. Obviously, himself's kind of a clutch player. Like, give me some thoughts, because it seems like he brings a lot to the team, but maybe it just isn't as obvious.
Yeah, I think he's. I would compare him a bit to me in some senses, and obviously he also played some of the lurk positions, and as you said, like on CT, I mean, famously Pit on Inferno, right? And I do believe that he was kind of the rock as well in the team. He kind of shared that with me, and I do believe that Device and dupreeh really needed guys like this to thrive and to know that, okay, I can do my crazy stuff or whatever it is, and these guys will pick up the slack or whatever it is. So I really enjoyed Emil, and I also think that he has evolved a lot as a player, and just watching him at Vitality and Falcons as well, really impressed by him. Now maybe Falcons isn't going so good, but I mean, long term or like looking over a longer period of time, I really enjoy watching him play because he's like a really solid guy on the team.
After this, obviously, the team, when they got Magisk, it pretty quickly got good. Like, I always remember the first event you won was that Dreamhack Marseille. And if people don't remember, like, this might be one of the most dominant tournaments ever. Like, you lost one map, it was a 16-14 to Liquid. Every other map and every team, you were just wrecking, like, 16-6, 16. It's even the one where, if people don't know, this is a weird story, but it's true. This is why people started calling Simple the GOAT. Because even he popped off against you guys. But he couldn't win. It was impossible. Like, one player couldn't beat this team, basically. Like, do you obviously, like, there were other tournaments with a lot of dominance and success, but do you remember when the team first properly came online? Like what was going on? How was it? Just the level was crazy.
Yeah, I always say this as a breakthrough moment, but also for me personally, because I think I had some really good clutches in that tournament. And famously, also, I wrote to the Prime Minister saying if they wanted a clutch minister back then, and he replied. So it kind of got a lot of attention in Danish newspapers. But I think what clicked in this tournament was that I would say this was where, and I said this before as well, but the preparation, I mean, it just felt so easy. Like, people, because when was this? This was in...
So like spring of 2018?
Yeah, it is still maybe a bit later, but I do believe that we just did like a whole lot preparation, and even like for the Navi guys or whatever it was, I think we'll just avoid Simple,
right.
Like it was
it works,
at that point.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, things were just clicking, and it's also hard for me to remember exactly what.
Yeah, sure.
What made it, and again, like, there is so many tournament wins.
Don't worry, there's loads more to talk about. By the way, let me just ask a follow-up there. One thing I've actually always thought is kind of like very fair about the guys in Astralis, even Device himself, is I've always said, if my teammate won every major in MVP and we were the number one team, I'd say he's the GOAT. In fact, if I'm Device, I've always told him, I'd say I'm the GOAT. What are you talking about? But I've noticed everyone, even in your team, was just like, yeah, Simple probably was the GOAT. Like, he was the best player or whatever.
Yeah.
Is just the feeling you got?
Well, I didn't think he was the best teammate, but like looking individually as a player, I mean, sure, I would say he was the GOAT. I mean, he carried that Navi team like insanely, and I think it was insane even that he had, like, we were destroying Navi in that final, and even though he had, like, I don't know, plus 10 or 15.
He had a huge game,
yeah, and he had the MVP medal as well. But I also think that, I mean, Device was the best team player, and by that I also think that he was the best player.
Right.
But obviously, looking at stats and stuff, I mean, Simple was the best, right? But I don't look at stats and as a
sure.
As a looking at players, or good players, because I think Device gave up a lot of his freedom and stuff like this in order to become a good teammate and to make us win.
Let me ask you a question about Device then, because the funny thing about his career is I've always thought his career would make an amazing movie too, because everyone was blaming him as the main choker and saying all that stuff about him and he was the failure, blah, blah. But then what's great is if you go and look when you guys win all these majors, it's like a different person. He becomes like the most clutch player ever. And if you put him in a major playoffs in this era, like he just wrecks everyone. And put it this way, those guys in NRG, that started a major, that fucking round's in their brain when he won with the 3 bullets. Like they can't get it out. They're like, what? That doesn't make sense. Like, so that it like became the opposite. Eventually, people were almost scared to play this guy.
Yeah, I think he turned it around, and I think we also did a lot of things in Astralis to, I mean, as you said earlier, like hire sports psychologists. I mean, we were also very open about things in Astralis, and I think the openness really helped Device in some sense, because I think he was holding much of it in. I think we all were, and just being able to work with a sports psychologist, which would then ask the right questions and get the right talking points and stuff like this, get the right focus points, really helped us. And obviously, I think it also helped Device individually. And I see it as a natural also progress in a career where, of course, like you get a lot more tournaments, you get a lot of more situation where you have been pressured and stuff like this. So of course you're gonna evolve as a person, but I think you can speed up the process with like doing sports psychology or whatever it is.
Quite a cool point that literally a few days ago in a let me think. It would have been an ESL Pro League interview that Device said, because he was actually talking about his new Astralis, where he's like the in-game leader and he's working with new players. And one point he made, I thought was a really genius point, but I feel like a lot of people missed it because you have to know the history of the game to know what he means. He was trying to explain, because obviously he's got a brand new lineup he's working with, that like it's not like dupreeh, Xyp9x, and Device, who were the 3 from 2013. I mean, think about that. It's 2013 you guys were playing together. You win the major in 2017 and the dominance is in 2018. That's like 4 and 5 years later. The point he was sort of making was, it's not like you just instantly had all this chemistry and team play and just everyone knew what you were doing. Like you played together for years and years and years. I think it's probably the most underrated thing about the Astralis era later, is that 3 players basically almost never left each other's side. And so I guess what he's trying to imply that I want to ask you about is, it's not as though Astralis just had the best coach and the best tactics and the best players. It's like part of it also is, I'm going to guess when you play with someone for that many years, I've heard the same thing from the Virtus.pro guys. Eventually, it's almost like you just know what he's going to do. And so now it's like, he might even have to say what he's going to do. Maybe you just know how he'll rotate, or someone will hold the site, or when they'll flash for you. Yep. Does some of this happen eventually?
Yeah, definitely. I think we knew each other so well. I think you can also see it sometimes in how FaZe plays.
Yes.
And they don't even have to communicate like, I'm gonna like go ramp now or whatever it is, like Brokey, for example. But for me, it's more that we also know each other outside of the game, and right. The personality traits we know. We know when one is down or one is not feeling that great or whatever it is, and we have to lift him up, so to say. And I think this is something that you can also bring into the game, that, okay, now this guy not feeling the best, or maybe he's ill, like let's help him. Let's do something for him that will help him feel better or do better in the game. So for me, I mean, the obvious thing is that we know each other, but I also think that it's just the natural process of being human beings to watch each other that really, happens when you're with a guy or 2 guys for that long. And I still call them very good friends, and I speak regularly to both of them, and I really enjoy like talking to them still.
When, with this lineup, you won the first major, the FACEIT London one, it's funny that when people win, when the story gets told afterwards, it's like, well, they're obviously going to win and no one can beat them. But what people forget about this one major is, actually, people started to doubt Astralis because the 2 tournaments before the player break was Cologne. You guys lost to Navi in the semis. Then, obviously, after the player break was the infamous Dreamhack Stockholm, where bizarrely MSL was like the MVP fucking up, which still doesn't even make, that sounds like the Twilight Zone episode, mate. Like, I've even told him, I don't know how you did that, mate. He must have sold his soul for that game or something. So when you came into this FACEIT London, here's what people will actually forget, Xyp9x. Behind the scenes, and if everyone ever went and looked at what some of the commentators and analysts said, I won't say who they are, they know who they are. At the time, the hype actually, by the way, Xyp9x, because Team Liquid skipped the Dreamhack event, was that in scrims, Team Liquid was wrecking everyone. And I heard some people on broadcast even like, I think Team Liquid's going to win this major, and people were, maybe Astralis just peaked, and maybe, they're just good, but not the best, right? If people don't remember, you guys didn't lose a map in the playoffs. You just rolled through everyone. Give me some thoughts. Like, did you know you were the best? Did everything come together? What happened?
I do think that we knew that we were like in a really good shape, and I also think like the Dreamhack Stockholm was not really showing the real signs, or how do you say, like, and we knew that. And I mean, they had a 16-1 on those 2, I think, against us, and as you said, like MSL was popping off. And by the way, I think that he still writes on Twitter every other day that he won and is MVP of that tournament.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a funny joke in the CS scene, or the Danish scene. But anyway, I do believe that we knew that we would that we were the best team at that point still. And we also heard the stories about Liquid, and I also think we practiced against them. But as far as I remember, we didn't lose practices to them. And so.
One thing is, obviously before this, you had already played a bunch of those finals against the 2018 Liquid, the one that had Zeus as the coach and Taco as it wasn't the same as the 2019 one, guys. But in this era, they already had the nightmare scenario where they would beat everyone else. And then they always had to play you. They never somehow got it like, Navi can beat you or Fate, and then you get it. They always had to play you. And by the way, they've all said it in all their interviews. They all know that they were mind fucked and they could never win, etc. But what I've always wanted to ask was this part, Xyp9x, which is, it must have been really interesting for you guys, because you used to be that team before. You used to be the ones that thought we should beat NIP and VP and very good. But back then, this is what I want to ask was, how when you're the one who's the underdog and you're the one who can't break through, it always feels like, oh, it's unfair. Like I was under so much pressure. I always get a sense that when you become the dominant champion, you can sort of use that pressure against that team. It's like now it becomes a weapon for you in a way. Did you have this sense when you play them, like they're going to break, or if we keep trying, like they can't beat us in a way?
Yeah, and we always showed it towards the other teams, right? And even like at the breakfast area, whatever it was, like we could just see like people were looking at us and we're like, oh, they are so scared of us,
Right.
And it was so funny because we would instantly go up and we would just talk about it, what happened, or like these guys, they admire us so much, or how do you do it? They come over and ask, and it's just like, I mean, obviously it's a clap on your shoulder, but it's also like, I know if we're gonna face these guys, they're gonna shit their pants, right? And it just builds your confidence.
Do you actually think at this time, like, look, the reason why I asked this question is, if anyone ever goes and look at the win-loss record of Team Liquid in both versions, where they were both really good against Astralis, it's insane. Like, no joke, they win something mental, mate, like 2 series out of 20 played or something, right? I don't think in Counter-Strike history you almost ever have a thing like that. Normally, number 1 and number 2 trade games, and the reason it never made any sense is, other teams could beat you more often. Like the joke is, even like sometimes Fallen's teams, or Navi could win against you as worst teams, but then they would always beat those squads. Do you actually think if they'd have ever had like the similar breakthrough, maybe they had the right sports psychologist, or they'd have come to the right conclusion, was there like a certain times where maybe they should have beaten you? Should they have won a couple against you, or won a tournament you were at, etc.?
Which team, sorry?
Team Liquid.
I mean, problem was for that team, I think that I think the map pool always played in our favor in a lot of the games.
Yes.
And to be honest, we also played around with them, right? And with the Vertigo in Berlin, if I don't remember.
Yeah.
Wrong, yeah. And I just think that we were so focused on that matchup as well, because they were like the second best team for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And we knew what we had to work on. And I think we even like worked on maps based on that matchup,
Right.
basically. So if we could see that, okay, if we're going to face Liquid next tournament, then we have to work on these maps. And it wasn't really maybe the first matchup, because we would always end up getting, because we were seed 1, we would always end up getting like some Brazilian team, which weren't really the best at that time. Or maybe an Australian team or Chinese team or whatever it was. So yeah, we were very focused on Liquid, and I guess it paid off.
What about, I do want to ask about Zonic now, because as we've set the scene, his name came up many, many times as like, he's the one who like clashed with Carrigan on his vision of the game, and basically fired Carrigan eventually. He's the one who decided Config wouldn't join Omega's group. It wasn't the players, guys, for real. This is actually, this guy decided it all. And so what I want to ask was, the reason why for me, he is like, not only the ultimate, but the first true coach, if you think of like in football, like a manager like Alex Ferguson or some legendary figure, is because he also had that status, right? The other coaches tended to be like a failed player or like a friend of the team or the former teammate. And so they would just be more like, you know, a demo analyst, or they'd talk to you in a huddle. I always got the sense this guy was a leader in the team, right? And he also could discipline people too, right?
I think he had a lot of traits, which I don't necessarily think he knew himself as well. But it definitely helped that he did not like play CSGO and just came in like as a guy who has played CS. He knows about CS. I mean, of course, there was a steep learning curve for him as well with CSGO and the meta and stuff like this. But I think he just has some personality traits which really were enjoyable to be a part of as a player, and he would be able to read the room as well. Like I really like when coaches are able to read when, okay, now we can push it. Now we can't. Now, okay, there is some, because let's be honest, like CS players are very, like, they don't talk about issues, and they would just like sit in the corner and whatever, like, or say whatever to a discussion or whatever. Like they wouldn't find conclusions. But I think Zonic was very hands-on and understood when things were going not well, and when there were beef between two players or even like more players. And I think he was just like a good mediator in those scenarios. And then he's a really good friend, I would call him still. Yeah, I do believe that he was like the best coach that I've ever had, right?
I mean, yeah. One thing, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the history and the results speak itself, but I do believe that the personality traits and what he can do to make people comfortable in the team is insane, and he did it in Vitality as well.
Yes.
And I do believe if he cracks the code in Falcons, like he can do it again, because he is such a likable person, and he can demand people to do stuff because he understands you, right? And he knows when to push and not to.
Because I actually did want to ask you specifically, right? There was this drama recently with Falcons where people saw that like stupid clip the media team put in that documentary where he was like flaming everyone. But what's weird is this, right? First of all, if you follow my content, I like if things are drama, certain things behind the scenes are too dangerous to bring out right now when it's like still fresh because they can impact people's rep. But down the line, eventually all secrets can come out, and I can tell you what actually happened. Behind the scenes, by the way, there was way worse stuff than that guy just changing a mouse. That unfortunately, that's actually the team, believe it or not, trying to be nice to him and not fucking ruin his whole reputation. The Boros guy, he was doing a lot more than just changing a mouse, right? But the idea is you can't on camera see all the stuff that he's doing. So what they did is the mouse was almost like a metaphor also for like what this guy wasn't being serious in the game, wasn't practicing properly, he was doing silly things like change a mouse between matches, right? But what I actually thought when I saw that clip was, even though I understand why fans don't know this other information, it's behind the scenes stuff, and you just see what you see on the camera, it looks bad, it looks like, oh my God, he's like, the coach is like bullying a player. What they might not understand is, it actually makes me realise fans don't know what it's like inside teams with coaches and in-game leaders, because sometimes, like, even the way he's talking, he's actually not just hard flaming him, he's even sort of just, he's in a way, he's trying to actually like encourage him to do the right thing. He's sort of being like, hey mate, like, you know, you're fucking it up here, I know how good you are and you can do it. I thought actually he almost had like a fatherly tone, he had like a very interesting approach, but I also could see he had the balls also to confront someone with it. He's not just going to sit back like some coaches might, like, you know, hey, maybe don't do that next time. Like, he kind of was, he wanted to address the problem. I'm guessing this is part of Zonic's approach, that you address things that are going wrong, you fix problems.
Exactly, and I knew also when watching that documentary, like, it's, of course, everything is clipped, right? And I also know some of the stories from how it was, and of course, when, I mean, this is also on the content guys of Falcons that, I mean, maybe watch it through, get another person to watch it, which is not like a hardcore fan or doesn't know that much of CS or whatever it is, just to get a second view on it. But it didn't come out pretty, I'd say, but I understand, like, I've been in Astralis, I know how doing content is sometimes, and like there will be clips which will be unfortunate, and I don't think that the Falcons or Sonic thinks too much about it.
No.
Even though it's a meme, right?
Sure.
But it's a meme now. It's not like full blown out now anymore. But I see him as that guy who can take the really hard conversations and also put down the foot when it's needed. I really respect him for being able to do that and still have a really great relationship with the players, right? And still being able to move them even though he's demanding things of them.
One of the maps that is obviously iconic for Astralis was Nuke. It was the rework of Nuke. And the reason why I always thought this is actually the map I think made people realise it probably is the best team of all time. Because famously, since it was the map you would pick, well, the rework of Nuke was still a CT-sided map, especially back then. And if it's your map pick, every other team's going to go, we will start CT side. Yeah. You guys used to win the T side. Like, can you give me some thoughts? Because I don't think I've ever seen a team dominate a map like this.
No. I do believe that we actually weren't really afraid of picking Nuke because we knew, like, I think even sometimes we had better T sides than CT sides at some point. And it was like, I do also believe that Glaive was really good at calling in this map. It was a lot of mid rounds, right? I mean, Nuke is a lot of mid rounds. You take yard control or do secret smokes and get to a position and or even like set calling from the start of the round. I do believe that we cracked the code on it, and it was also one of these maps where CT they would do the same thing over and over again. And I mean, I think we had the famous nade stack on top of silo inside, and because people would be playing there or whatever it was, you know, it was a really easy way of anti-shredding the map itself.
By the way, obviously one thing that was legendary about Astralis, like you say, was the utility usage. But people, when they hear that, they just think they mean like an extra flash or a smoke. Like it's like you said, you guys would have clearly anti-strats where like the Molotovs you put on Inferno are to like trap a guy or kill him. It's not just like to clear an area or whatever. Similar with these nade stacks, like you can either do chip damage or just get a kill directly on a guy, right? Like this is clearly prepared stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we would prepare. Famously, I think we also had this on Inferno, where people would line up the retake set from CT Banana on the first box inside, and I think we saw this, like a guy would do this like 10 out of 15 rounds, and we just walk up Banana, throw the 2 nades or 3 nades, and like we had the free side, right? I mean. It was so easy. People wouldn't do it now because this is not how people play anymore. But people really were stupid back then, and they really didn't think of this. And they would just go on autopilot, have no real plan for the round, just play their own style or just start the same round all the time as CT. And this was basically why we could do the nade stacks as well as T.
Also, I wanted to get your take, because a lot of other people actually agree with my perspective on this, which is the reason everyone focused on nuke is because you had that crazy win streak. But I actually always thought, bearing in mind every single team in Pro Counter-Strike played Inferno and loved Inferno, this is probably the real best map, because on this map, you might be in the best on both sides. Like famously, I think the CT side, every person might be in their perfect CT position on this map. Like, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yo, yeah, I mean, Inferno... I mean, me and Glaive and Banana just shooting through the smokes, and I mean, we were so good at fighting Banana. Like, and I also think that, I mean, we had this period where we had Nuke and Inferno, like both maps really good. And we just knew, like, okay, I mean, if they have Permban or Nuke or whatever it was, I mean, we just pick Inferno, right? It was that point where they would know either Nuke or Inferno we will pick, and we would just win it downright. So, I mean, having that sense of security of just saying like, yeah, we are 1-0, it's like insane, right? Yeah. And I do believe that we had like 80 or 90% win rate on both of the maps, and even all the other maps was also like 60 or 70%, right? And I mean, you would never find a team with those stats again, I think. That's crazy.
In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, riding with me. And it is thanks to the support of the following people, this video and all of them on my channel are made possible. Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Gore, Animosity, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those dinner discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.